You now have Webpack all set up, and in this video, we're going to start taking advantage of what Webpack actually offers us. One of the main things it offers us is the JavaScript module system, which gives us a better way to structure our applications, so that's what we're going to spend the next couple of videos talking about. Now, the good news is that we don't need to install anything new or change our configuration at all. So we can actually close down package.json, Webpack config, and index.html. We're going to spend all of our time working with files in the source directory. We're going to work with index.js, and we're going to create a new file as well. Let's go ahead and kick things off by actually deleting everything in index.js. We're going to start from a nice, clean slate. As I mentioned a couple of videos ago in the visualization, the whole point of the module system is to give us a better way to structure and build out our JavaScript applications. In the past, if I wanted to have one file use a function defined in a different file, we had to load in multiple files with multiple script tags, and we had to load them in a specific order. No longer is that going to be the case. With Webpack, we always just have one file coming out. This contains everything needed to run our application, and we only ever load it in with a single script tag, even though the underlying application might have multiple scripts. So let's go ahead and demonstrate how this is going to work by creating a second script. In the source directory, we're going to make a new file, and this is just going to contain some generic code. So we can call it anything we like. I'm going to call it utilities.js. In this file, we will eventually define some functions, and we'll try to use those functions in index.js. To kick things off, let's go ahead and add a couple of console.logs, one to the top of each file. In this one, I'm just going to console.log index.js. In the other one, I'm just going to console.log utilities.js. And the whole point of this is to just visualize exactly how and when these files are running. Now that we have this in place, we can move over to the terminal. Over inside of the terminal, I'm going to have the first tab run live server. So npm run serve. And the second tab is currently running Babel. We're going to shut that down. We don't want to run both Babel and Webpack since they're both trying to change the same file. Now, yes, for the next few moments, we are going to lose the advantages of Babel, but later in the section, we'll bring that back in using both Babel and Webpack together. Over in this second tab, we can use npm run Webpack to actually run Webpack. Now, once again, we can notice that the only file being loaded is the source index.js file. Nowhere in this output do I see anything about my new utilities.js file. That's because when Webpack starts, it starts with the entry point. Our entry point, index.js, gets loaded. Index.js doesn't specify that it needs anything from any other files, so no other files actually run. If I go ahead and refresh the browser with live server up and running, what are we going to see in the console? We're just going to see index.js printing. So at this point, we just have one file. Now the solution is to not change Webpack config at all. The solution is to use the JavaScript modules system. It gives us two new things. We have the import statement and the export statement. The import statement can be used to grab something from another file. So index.js can use import to grab a function or a variable from some other file. The export statement can be used to export something from a file. So we can export a function from utilities.js that gets used over in index.js, allowing us to share code between those files. Currently, there's nothing to actually grab from utilities.js, and that's okay. All we're going to do is use the import statement to get this file to run, so we can actually see its console.log printing in the browser. To do this, we're going to add an import statement into index.js, and import statements start off with the import keyword. After that, we're going to provide a set of quotes, and in here, we provide the path to the file we want to load. Now, this can be a relative path, so we can start with // which means that we're starting from the directory where index.js lives. That is the source folder. In the source folder, we have utilities.js, so right after the / utilities.js. Now, when it comes to our import statements with Webpack, we can actually leave off the file extension. They're completely optional, so this and this are identical. Since we don't need the file extension, I typically leave it off. Now we have our very first import statement in place. This is going to make sure that the utilities.js file actually runs. Let's go ahead and switch over to the terminal and rerun Webpack. Later on, we will come up with a way to automate this process. For now, we're just going to manually rerun the script, and we're going to take notice of something different about the output. We can see that our entry point now has 2 files listed. Yes, we are still loading index.js, but we also have utilities.js being loaded. This is only showing up because of the import statement we added to our code. Over inside of the browser, we can see things refreshed, and we can see we have both console.log statements. We have utilities.js and index.js showing up, so we now have both files executing. Now you might think that to actually share code between the 2 files, I can just create a variable over here and use that variable over here. But that's not the case. Let's go ahead and prove it and talk about why, then we'll look at how we can actually share code. So let's say we have a very simple function that I want to share with the rest of the application. For the moment, let's just create a function that adds 2 numbers, nothing complex. So we have const add, which equals, we'll use an arrow function. So we have 2 arguments, a and b. I'm going to use the shorthand syntax to return a plus b. Super simple function. Now we have this function defined, and then we load in that file, and we've seen it run. We proved that by viewing the log statement. So down below, we might think we can actually access add. Console.log, adding. Let's go ahead and add 2 numbers like 32 and 1. Now I'm going to resave the program. I am going to head over to the terminal, rerun Webpack. The browser is indeed going to refresh, and what do we get? We get an error. Add is not defined. So this brings us to the first important thing to note about using the modules system. Each file has its own separate scope. So no longer are variables shared between files, and this is a good thing. Now, this separate scope doesn't mean we can't share code between files. After all, that's the whole point of the modules system. This does mean, though, that we have to be explicit about what we're exporting from one file and what we're importing from another. Currently, utilities has no exports, meaning that index.js is actually not going to be able to access add even if it wanted to. We're going to go ahead and change that by exporting add right here. We can create an export statement out of an existing variable declaration by just adding export with a space up front. So here we are now saying we are exporting the constant add. We could also export the let add if we wanted to. Now this doesn't affect the rest of the file. Down below, I could still use add if I needed to. I still have access to that function. By adding export up front, all we're saying is that other files should also be able to access this if they need it. So now that we are explicitly exporting the add function, we can access it from index.js by making a change to the import statement. It is not enough to just import the file. We have to specify the things we want from that file. So I'm going to go ahead and comment out this import statement, and we're going to look at a different import statement that allows us to grab things like add. Right here, we do still start off with the import keyword, but then we set up some curly braces, so we open and close them. We'll talk about what goes inside of there in just a second. After the curly braces, we use the from keyword, and then after from, we specify the path we had up above. So inside of quotes, ./utilities. Now the question is, what goes inside of those curly braces? Well, this is where we define the exports that we want to access. So if we want to access add right here, we specify add. Now index.js isn't just running utilities.js, it's actually grabbing something from it. This is going to cause the code down below to work. We can go ahead and prove this by saving both files. I'm then going to switch over to the terminal. I'm going to rerun Webpack, and then the browser will automatically refresh in the background. And hopefully, if everything went well, we see our sum, and that is exactly what we're getting. Right here, we have 32 plus 1, which does indeed equal 33. We were able to get this done by defining the function in one file and actually accessing it in another. Now, there's no limit to how many things we can import or export from a given file. We could set up another export if we wanted to. So over here, I could export a const called name, and I could set the value equal to my name, just the string Andrew. I could then access this over in index.js by changing the import statement to also grab name. If you want to grab multiple things, you just provide a comma separated list inside of curly braces. That would be add, comma, space. In this case, the next thing I want to grab is name. Now I have access to both add and name inside of index.js, and I can do something with them. So right here, console.log name to print that import as well. If we rerun Webpack from the terminal, we are now going to see Andrew printing inside of the browser, and that is exactly what we get. So this gives us a super flexible way to communicate between files. Now we could have other files in the program as well that also import from utilities.js, and this is something we'll be taking a look at in several videos. Now it's challenge time. You're going to have to create a new file and import it into index.js using something that the file exports. Up above, I am going to remove the old import statement that's no longer necessary, and down below, I'm going to paste in the challenge comments. So what you're going to be doing is creating a function that takes in a string and converts that string to uppercase, adding an exclamation mark onto the end. So you're going to create a new file called scream.js. You're then going to create and export a scream function that takes in a string as its one and only argument, and you are going to return the string converted to uppercase with an exclamation mark on the end. The last thing you're going to need to do after you actually create and export that function is use it. You're going to import it into this file, index.js, and use it with some sort of text. You could use it with either this text here or the text down below. So take some time to knock this one out and test your work. Once you're done, actually rerun Webpack and make sure you see the correct output inside of the browser's console. Pause the video, test your work, and when you're done, click play. How'd that one go? I'm going to kick things off by creating the new file in the source directory. So right here in source, I'm going to call this one scream.js. Then what are we going to do next? We are going to create and export that function. So I am going to export const scream, which equals a function. This function is going to take in a single argument, some text, and all we're going to do is return something. So I'm going to use the arrow function shorthand. What are we trying to return? Well, I'm going to return a template string. The first part of the string is going to be text converted to uppercase. So text dot to uppercase. Right after that, all we're going to do is add the exclamation mark on. Now there are a ton of different ways you could structure this function. It's not about the function definition itself. It's about actually creating the file, exporting the function, and using it. So we have our export in place and we have our function all set up. We can now move into index.js to actually import and use it. I'm going to start with the import statement up above. Right here, we are going to import. We're going to set up our curly braces from the following location, /scream. Perfect. What do we want to grab from that? Well, we provide what we want to grab inside of curly braces. In this case, there's only one thing to grab. It is the scream function. The last thing you needed to do was to actually use it. I'm going to use it with the name variable right here. So I am going to pass to console.log whatever comes back from calling scream, and I am going to call scream with the name string. Perfect. So that should be it for this challenge. I'm going to go ahead and test my work by saving both files and rerunning Webpack. Once the browser refreshes, I should see my name in all uppercase with an exclamation mark on the end, and that is exactly what I'm getting. All right, now that the challenge is done, we are all done with this video. Now I still have lots more to say about the module system. There are other ways we can import and export things, and I'm excited to continue talking about it. Let's go ahead and remove the challenge comments and take a quick moment to recap what we covered. In this video, you learned about both the import and export statement with Webpack. We learned that it allows us to share code between files. In utilities.js, for example, I was able to use export to export two things, add a name, and in index.js, I was able to import both of those using the import statement. So this is how our files are going to share code. No longer do we have this global namespace that all files have access to. Each file now has its own private scope. I'm super excited to continue on in the next video talking about JavaScript modules, so let's go ahead and jump right in.